Coming up today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, a defining stretch of games lies ahead. Will it allow the Hornets to maybe get back to play-in contention? We'll talk about all of it today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This podcast, your favorite podcast, now also has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Hornets newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com. Sign up now. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets team newsletter. There's the man writing it, Doug Branson, everyhornetsboxscore.com, Locked On NBA. Also find his subtext information on everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mehl. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m., Sports Radio 92.7 FM. Doug, I was looking at the schedule, looking at the next 9 games specifically. It's always dangerous, but I was hoping for some good news, and I think I found it. So if you look at the month of December, you're actually going to, I think, define the rest of the way via how you perform in the rest of December. Chicago up next. Chicago up next, right? Because remember, they have this long rest. Indiana Sunday, and they don't play again until Friday. They've had some long rests this season. It feels like we haven't seen many of the 4-day rest periods, and we've seen a couple of those. So here's another one.
Well, and this is a byproduct of the NBA Cup. And I think the last one was a little bit. And so the schedule gets a little weird until the Cup is over. And so, yeah, they can thank themselves for this break because
yeah, that's true.
They don't get it, and I think they get a few decent matchups. I mean, they got Philly. The Phillies got the big 3 back. They look like they're a little bit more organized, so that might be more difficult. But the Chicago game is, I think, somewhat winnable, and that's a byproduct of them not making the tournament as well. So yes, big rest. Hopefully an opportunity for this team to get healthy and get this thing going back to 500. And that's what Adam is wondering about on the Sicko Brigade. Adam asks, do you think the road to 500 is open after the win against the Pacers? So hope springs eternal in the Sicko Brigade. Join subtext.com/Locked On Hornets.
Can you tell me what division he's in? Because that's a sick division, I think, the road to 500. I don't know. If we look at the schedule, right? Chicago up next Friday, Philly, Washington, Philly, Houston, Washington, OKC, Chicago, Detroit. So if you include Indiana, the next 9 games, you finish with Detroit. A lot of winnable matchups in that stretch. So, Doug, here they are right now. The Hornets are standing with a 7-17 record. I don't know if you want to split. You go 5-5. You finish 12-22, something like that. Like you go 500 in this stretch, then you're still not even really all that close to 500 for the rest of the season. But I do think if you go somewhere even further than that, right? So let's say you sweep Chicago, you sweep Washington, you're already off to a great start. You have Detroit, who you've already beaten twice, dramatic fashion, but you've already beaten twice. Like, I do think this next 9-10 game stretch, Doug, it's going to be pretty defining for what the Hornets view themselves as, how we view the Hornets going the rest of the way, really the turn of the new year. Once you're finishing 2024, going into 2025, well, I think we're going to know a lot about how the Hornets can compete. I don't know if we're going to get LaMelo or Trey Mann back. I think within the next couple of days, we're going to hit that, 2-week threshold, right, of having those guys be reevaluated in 2 weeks. Usually that means they're still injured, and we're not going to give you another reevaluated designation. We're just going to announce questionable with one of these random injury reports on Hornets PR, twitter.com. So defining stretch, we're going to learn a lot about the Hornets over the course of the rest of 2024.
Well, the definition needs to be healthy. Like, they've got to get one or more of Trey Mann, LaMelo Ball, or Miles Bridges back into the lineup. Without that, I don't have much hope for this December stretch. I do agree with you that this is defining, but I think it's more about survival. Like, I don't see them ripping off a big run here heading into the new year, to get closer to 500. But I think it is about survival. I think you've got to take one of two of the Chicago games. You can't slip on a banana peel in the Washington games. Both of those are on the road in Washington. You've got to annihilate them like every other team has and put them closer to Bobcats' infamy, honestly. Like the Nuggets, what are the Nuggets doing? Losing to the Washington Wizards. You can't do that.
It's crazy.
We got to get this team to Bobcats territory so they can take away our shame. Detroit failed to take away our shame last season, but Washington provides new hope because they're not only losing a majority of their games, but they're losing them by 1,000 points. So the Hornets have to take care of business there. Houston's going to be extremely difficult, although, they gave them a run for their money. Got to win to open the season, 110-105.
Right. Like, this is right, because I'm with you. It really is more about survival. All that being said, if this stretch of games is more so about survival, it means the rest of the season is probably not going to go well. It means that there is no road to 500. If this stretch of games where you have Washington multiple times, Chicago multiple times, Philly, we'll see about some Joel Embiid rest. If it's the best team to play if you're not a good team, because Philly might have somebody injured, they might have two, they might have three guys injured. So if this stretch isn't going to be something they can really capitalize on, then there is not a 10-game stretch that exists.
Okay, don't save this and throw it back in my face later on in like April or May. But if they come out of this stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games, if they come out of that less than 500, I think it's going to be pretty much impossible to come back from. Why do I say that? Because after this stretch of games, they then go on the road for 7 of their next 8, including a West Coast road trip that's going to take them to both Los Angeles teams, Phoenix, Utah. That's a gimme. But then they come back and play Chicago again at Chicago. And then you can throw Dallas after that at home and then go back on the road to Memphis. That is about as brutal a stretch as I can think of. And I didn't even mention at Cleveland in that stretch as well. They play Phoenix twice, and we don't know if Durant's going to be back for that. Phoenix is struggling a little bit without Durant. But, we just don't know that injury status yet. So that's a tough stretch. If they can get through that, then you're looking at the opportunity, Adam, to address your question, then you're looking at the opportunity for a run to get back into 500, to get at least within striking distance of 500, because then they have a huge homestand followed by a huge road stretch that I think is going to be super interesting, because you don't get those in schedules typically, but they have, and we talked about this when we looked at the schedule, but they have 8 or 9 games at home followed by 8 or 9 games on the road. And that really encompasses half of January and most of February into the All-Star break. And so, but even in that road stretch, you've got Detroit, Brooklyn, Orlando. There are winnable games in that road stretch before you go out west. So all that to say, there's a glimmer of hope, but man, they've got to get these guys back as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that's what's tough, right? We've done so much stretching this segment that I feel like my arms are 10 feet long now. So
it's important. Look at this, you don't want to pull anything. You'll end up on the injury list like all the Hornets.
That is true. But so if that's the thing, right? Even when you look at this next this next group of games, let's go with the group. This next group of games that you have. Even so, you're still going to be the underdog in half of them, right? With some of the injuries, you're going to be the underdog against Philly. Chicago, you'll probably be the underdog even still. So it's it's not going well because of the injuries here, man. You just got to get these guys back as soon as possible, and then see what they can do. If you're really trying to salvage some play-in contention, because that's clearly the ceiling for this team, in my opinion, based on everything that's happened so far and based on what we can reasonably project.
But one more bit of hope is that the Hornets' recent stretch has been difficult. I mean, they've played Cleveland, New York, Philly. That was a winnable game. They should have won that game. Atlanta, New York again, Miami, Orlando, Milwaukee. I mean, that was the losing stretch. Like, find me a team in there other than Philly because they were missing so many guys. But find me a team, and Atlanta was streaking. Like, Atlanta's kind of right there with them in the Eastern Conference, but Atlanta was on a hot streak during that loss. And so, like, find me a team there that you would have said, oh, yeah, the Hornets got, like, a really great shot, particularly with the injuries. And yet, lost by 6 to Milwaukee, lost by 4 to Miami, lost by 1 to New York, lost by 3 to Atlanta, lost by 6 to Philly, and then the blowouts start to happen against New York and Cleveland. But so they're competitive. If they can just get 1 or 2 guys back, I really do believe there's going to be just a surge of energy that flows through this team. And Mark Williams hopefully will play more and more, particularly in those Philly games when they're going to need some size. And when they play OKC again, going up against Hartenstein, like hopefully they can get Mark Williams playing a few more minutes heading into this stretch. And I just got one more stretch in there, and we see something. We have to see something.
You brought his name up. Let's talk about him. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Yeah, let's have a Mark Williams conversation. What we've seen in limited minutes, does it feel like he's getting better? Where do we need him to be during this 10-game stretch? Coming up next, Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, Doug, so we've had Mark Williams return. He did sit out this last game against Indiana. There is just a little bit more injury management to be had with Mark. They really could have used him in this game too, but at least the Hornets end up winning. You have Miles Turner. I think it's a game you thought you could have used him coming into this one. You squeaked a victory out barely, despite not being able to get it in the front court, but at least you survive here. So if you look at the other games that Mark has played, he hasn't played many. He's played 3 games since coming back from injury. And the first 2 games, he wasn't getting very many minutes, and it's actually continued that. So 9 against Philly, 11 against New York, 11 against Cleveland. I do think you saw him get better with every single one of these games, right? You look at the point total for Mark. You got 4 against Philly. You got 6 against New York. You got 12 against Cleveland. The efficiency. It's kind of funny. 25% against Philly, the efficiency. 50% against New York, the efficiency. 100% against Cleveland. Hey, escalator, baby. We're moving right on up here with the way that Mark Williams is improving. What have you noticed from him in this 3 games that he's played since injury? And where do you want him to be, in the next 5 games, the next 10 games? Like, talk to me about where you project Mark Williams and what you've seen from him so far.
So, yeah, I mean, he's only playing 9 to 10 minutes over the course of like a half, and then they'll set him for the second half. So that's probably going to continue over the next couple of games as he gets back into the groove. And then, I don't expect him to play. I didn't look in that 8-game slate. I'll go slate instead of stretch there. I didn't see if any of those were back-to-backs, but I don't expect him to play any back-to-backs until like maybe later in the season after the new year. So there's that. That's what I expect in terms of just his injury management. What I've seen from his game, I thought the first couple of games he was slow and plodding. I thought much more aggressive, much more springy in the Cleveland game offensively. He started the game with 2 assists. He hit Daquan Jeffries for a nice little cut towards on the baseline. So nice to see him passing a little bit more. And, in terms of his defense, I mean, in that Cleveland game, he got absolutely eviscerated by Evan Mobley 3-point shots. Like, he was just dropping, I thought, a little bit too far. I don't know if that was a scheme thing or if that was him just being a little, like, he's probably not going to recover as well as he did before because, again, I think he's just like a little bit of out of game shape. So I don't know what that was, but Evan Mobley was just absolutely eating him alive. So defensively, I think there's some things to work on. Although he is, again, he's a guy that can chase guys out of the paint, and you're seeing that. It's just if he has to guard in space, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him right now. We're going to see Mark Williams sort of refine his game over the next 20 to 30 games.
No, with Evan Mobley, look, mobile dude was on a tear, scored 23 points.
Mobley.
Yeah, that's right. I thought about it too, but I'll let it go. Evan Mobley is a really hard matchup for an injured big just coming back from a foot injury. So here's Mark, who is more so of a paint-oriented big, and then Evan just hits a bunch of shots, goes for 23 points in the first quarter, eventually records a career high with what he did against Charlotte, even if he got cool, quote unquote, over the next 3 quarters of play. But that's a tough one. I do bet that a lot of that was coaching, just letting Evan have those 3-point shots. He's not an amazing 3-point shooter. He was shooting better at the beginning of the season. I think went for a little bit of a cool off session himself. And then, just against the Hornets, I guess that was a get right type of shooting game for him. Other than that, I think with me, it's all about conditioning. It's all about, can we get to 12, 15, 18, 25 minutes? I think that's what you're hoping for. Already, you're starting to see a little bit of an impact offensively. So much of what we talk about with Mark is just protecting the paint, being a big rim deterrence guy. But offensively, especially in that game against New York, that was the second game back, it was nice to see a couple of flushes. It was nice to just see, okay, here's a big dude that is going to be able to get a dunk off in time because he doesn't have to take so much time leaving the floor. He's already standing and able to dunk, just barely being able to slide a piece of paper between the court and his feet. So just having that type of height is real nice already. And then he goes 5 of 5 against Cleveland when they did need some size as well. So already I think you're seeing some type of offensive impact. The problem is too, man, you're seeing that for, again, 10, 11 minutes. It's going to be a slow burn here. Now, you asked about the back-to-back part of the schedule. Only one game in that slate of games that we talked about is going to be a second night of a back-to-back. You have Philly the second night of a back-to-back. Won't face another back-to-back situation until you get to mid-January.
I wonder if that's a back-to-back for Philly as well, because that would be convenient. Then you probably won't have Embiid for that game.
I'll look it up.
So a couple of other things that I've noticed with Mark Williams, and a few thoughts. One thing I've noticed is that when he runs pick and roll with Brandon Miller, the opposing defense is much less likely to go after Brandon Miller in the same way that they would when he runs handoffs or pick and rolls with other players, because they know Mark, quick catch, bam, dunk. And so it allows Brandon to, I think, improve that dribble game a little bit. His handle isn't as exposed, and he can work that pick and roll game a little bit better. So I love that. And then just imagine that, inserting LaMelo Ball back into the frame, inserting Miles Bridges back into the frame. There's just a lot of things that they can do with Mark Williams on the floor that you're not going to be able to do necessarily if you're running Daquan Jeffries or you're running, Moussa Diabate out there. So that's great. And then a lot of the scoring in the Cleveland game came from offensive rebound putbacks, which was an important part of the Hornets offense with Nick Richards healthy earlier in the season, and helped to hide some of the issues that they have half-court wise. And so if they can, the more they can get back to that, the better off their offense is going to be, and allow them to stay in some of these games that they might not be able to stay in otherwise. That's what Mark Williams can do for you. That's what he did against Cleveland. I mean, he helped pace them a little bit in the first half. Had Evan Mobley not just gone absolutely nuclear, which was partly on Mark Williams, then the score would have been a lot more in the Hornets' favor in the first half. But again, we're limited in what we can say about Mark Williams, I think, at this point, because it's not just the sample size being small game-wise. It's that he's only in for a half. Like, I don't know what Mark Williams can do. I mean, so think of all the games that we've seen from Mark or Miles or LaMelo, where it's like, or Brandon, where it's like, quiet first couple of quarters, and then bam, they hit you over the head. Like, we don't get that because he's not playing full games yet.
Yeah, last thing for me, I am interested to see if we start to see the extension of the shot at any time. Against New York, he had that push shot, I guess, 10, 11 feet from the rim. It bounced way up high, bounced, and then eventually missed. I thought it might go in off the initial bounce, but I'm wondering if we get 10, 15 feet extended out. The three-point shot, I don't think we're going to see that for a little bit. I don't expect to see it, but I do wonder. Like, it is interesting to me that some of these rolls in front of the basket, directly in front of the basket, you've seen some of those like extension kind of one-hand push shots from him. So that would be nice to continue to extend the distance just a little bit, and then continue to create some space for LaMelo to work into the paint. I really do. I find that interesting, especially with the Porzingis role, the Brook Lopez role, those guys being able to extend some stuff out offensively. Charles Lee being a part of both of the Milwaukee Celtics regimes over the last couple of years. Like, Doug, I do expect to see it some point from Mark. I just don't expect to see it here anytime soon. But not even 25 feet out, 30 feet out like Brook, right? Like, or Kristaps. I do expect to see Mark Williams jump shooting at some point, set shooting some point, at least 15 feet out, and then we'll work from there.
Yeah, I just think that kind of thing only comes when you're at like maximum confidence and maximum rhythm, and he's not anywhere near either of those things right now. And what that requires is fully healthy offseason into a fully healthy preseason, where you're like practicing that stuff a lot with your team heading into a healthy season, and then you're in rhythm, then you have confidence in your game, then the offense is flowing, and those opportunities present themselves, and you don't fall immediately back into like, okay, I've got to find who am I handing off to, who am I passing to, what's happening here, and that's when you start to look for your own shot. So until LaMelo comes back, it's absolutely not happening. Then at least LaMelo, because LaMelo really is the only player on the roster, and I'm not including Brandon Miller in this, the only player on the roster that has the drive gravity where he's going to pull guys so far into the cup that it's going to leave Mark Williams with absolute space to think about it and then pull up, right? Because Brook is at the point, and Kristaps, they don't think about it anymore. They just bam. Like, Mark is still going to have to, the beginning point for the three-point shot for him is going to be, I'm wide open, and I can think about it and then shoot. So, that's going to come, if it comes at all, it's going to be like when they're fully eliminated, later on in the season, and they can fool around a little bit.
Oh, man. Yeah. Hey, at least we'll have some fun stuff to watch for when they're finally eliminated. The Mark Williams three-point shot. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
You guys delivered. There are a lot of questions in the Sicko Satchel. We answer some of those questions next in the final segment. Before we do that, I want to tell you this episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never really what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, they really mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. One more segment to go. Locked On Hornets. Time to rummage the sicko satchel. We are scrolling. We are trying to figure out what we want to answer today. There are a lot, Doug. So just randomly grab a question for the people. What you got for us?
Rummaging. And yeah,
go.
by the way, if you want to ask your question in the sicko satchel, your question, your comment, join subtext.com/Locked On Hornets 14-day trial. If you haven't signed up previously, it helps support the show. So check that out. All right, this one comes from Haley of the 12th Dwight Howard division. Could you do a comparison of the Hornets and the Magic, two teams with injured stars who were expected to flounder in the meantime, but the Magic somehow kept winning while the Hornets took the dive? Maybe this will change for Orlando now that Franz is down too.
Yeah, it's
Watching
tough.
them play each other, it seemed like the Magic made a lot of similar mistakes, but they still pulled it together at the end and overcame their lack of offensive power. Every time I watch them, I find myself wondering why they are pulling it off and the Hornets aren't. Does it simply come down to injuries for the Hornets, or is there other stuff at play?
Fun question. I really like this one, except that it's a little painful to answer, but I do think it's a good one. So, one, if you're asking how the Magic are able to pull it off while losing some of your offensive pieces, and yet here they are still pretty high in the standings, here they are as a competitive first-round playoff team last year, the answer to that question is that they are undeniably great at defense, and they have long, rangy defenders all across the freaking board. They have spent their entire lottery process selecting a bunch of big dudes. It was like a Carowinds ride. If you were not this tall, you could not hop on the ride. You could not join the Orlando Magic. Jalen Suggs, I believe he barely was able to ride that ride. And what does he do? Well, he defends the hell out of the basketball. He defends like hell when he's on ball. That's the issue, right? For the Hornets, they don't have defenders like that. Think about it. You have Franz. You have Jonathan Isaac, known as the best per 36-minute defender in the NBA. You have Jalen Suggs at the top of the key. Wendell Carter is also just a big body down low. Paolo Banchero, don't know about his defense as much, but it's still just a big body out there that you can, put on whoever you really want to, because you got arms and legs and 7-footers and 6'10" guys all over the place. I think the answer is defense as to why the Orlando Magic are able to steady the fort, even if offensively they're still challenged, even when there's not anybody healthy. They're still offensively challenged at time because they just rely so much on Paolo to facilitate and Franz to score and half court and make some shots, but they absolutely could use another just offensive-centric, dynamic playmaker for that squad. Defense carries you a long way, though.
Yeah, they're really good defensively without Paolo. They're not elite defensively, or at least they haven't proven that this season. When they've gone up against high-powered offenses, they've gotten shellacked a few times by New York, by Phoenix when they were fully healthy. It's been and by OKC. Been a couple of games where they've gotten really hammered by opposing offenses that were shooting well. So there's that. So I think there's a little bit behind the Magic that's like, okay, what's going on there? Are they truly elite? How have they done it? I agree with Walker that it is about size. And that's the big comparison with the Hornets, who I think have come in with good defensive mentality, have come in with good defensive game plans, but all of that is kind of whatever if you don't have the size, particularly down low, to execute some of those game plans, and they haven't had that. And so you've had some guys overachieve, but also I would put this into the pot too. You know that feeling when you see Cody Martin harass someone on defense, or you see Josh Green harass someone on defense, and you're like, that's great. I'm glad the Hornets have that now. The Magic have been assembling those kinds of players for multiple seasons and have had those guys playing together for multiple seasons. That's how you build an elite defense. You go out and find those type of guys who have the willingness to play defense, who have the size to play defense, particularly on the wing. And then you have some centers that can do what you want them to do. Like Goga Bitadze does what they want him to do. Wendell Carter Jr. has an ability to kind of do some things rebounding wise and helps them shoot. But they play those guys have played together, and they've been generally healthy for a couple of seasons now. That's been the missing ingredient for the Charlotte Hornets. They haven't had that.
Well, and so with the Magic, it is interesting to watch their build up. I don't even want to say glow up. I don't know if they've glown up all the way. Glowed up? I don't know if they've glowed up all the way, but there is a buildup. If you look at their draft history, Doug, it doesn't come without their misses, right? They still went after the same profile player all the time, but there was a 2-year back-to-back stretch where they went for Mo Bamba, failure, and Chuma Okeke, who was injured, but it's the same defensive type of mentality. And that's what often happens in these processes. In fact, let's go to the process where Philly had to fail on a couple of draft picks before they were able to contend in the postseason. Still, a lot of people would say that that was a failed experiment, but you get the idea. Jahlil Okafor didn't work out for them. You're talking about Nerlens Noel, didn't necessarily work out for him. So they had to miss on a couple of guys too, just like the Magic, but they kept a profile and what they liked. And then once you got to a really high draft pick, once you got to number 1, getting the star, right? High, like a guy that was really skilled, they nailed it with Banchero. And they could have gotten, Chet Holmgren would have also been a good pick. We thought it was going to be Jabari Smith. And sometimes
that would have been a bad pick.
One of the top 3 guys is just not going to work out for you. The Hornets did the same thing, right? If James Wiseman falls to them, they're selecting James Wiseman. You got to get lucky sometimes in the draft. So the answer is they spent so many years drafting a certain type. They had a vision. They had to miss a couple times, but eventually you have so many bites at the apple that you're going to get to the core. And that's exactly what happened here. They capitalized it on once they got to Paolo Banchero. And here they are, where they're a fun team. Now, Doug, they are everybody's favorite league pass. Hey, are they ready to make the move team? Is this the squad? And it's also why we've seen some, I don't want it to happen, but it would be a fun idea to imagine LaMelo playing with a bunch of those guys. That would be a lot of fun, but no, go find your own LaMelo. We want to keep ours here in Charlotte.
And honestly, I don't think that the Hornets are too far off just in terms of when you look at the games that they've been competitive in over the past, over the losing streak that they have into the win against the Pacers. They've been playing tough enough defense to, hold some of those teams down offensively enough to be competitive. So, I think they're probably running, a year or 2 behind what the Orlando Magic have been doing, because the Orlando Magic had to go through a lot of suffering, as you just profiled there, before they got to this point. So, yeah, I don't know that there's I think the magic ingredient for the Magic is that every single one of their players loves to play defense. The Hornets are getting there, but it's a process. And we came into this season saying this was about Jeff Peterson and Charles Lee determining who was going to be on that train and who needed to, go to the rotation station and never come back. And so I think part of that is, are you willing to commit on defense or not? And if the answer is no, then they're going to move on, because you've seen teams like the Magic have success with that formula.
Yeah. All right. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks to Haley writing that question in. Thanks to Haley.
And Adam, too. And we'll get to more. Well. We're going to answer all of them. And if we don't get a chance to answer all of them this week, I will answer them on the on Subtext, on the Sicko Brigade. So join subtext.com/Locked On Hornets.
Also, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Join that as well. And then listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Sports Radio 92.7 FM. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.